In a rush to reach the hospital and calm her anxiety, Nastya's attempts didn't go well. She nearly got hit by a car while hurriedly crossing the road at a red traffic light. The news of her grandfather being hospitalized reached her through a phone call from a neighbor while she was at school. Taking immediate leave from school, she rushed to the hospital upon learning about her grandfather's condition. When she arrived, the girl found her grandfather in the resuscitation unit, where the doctor informed her that he had experienced a severe hypertensive crisis, which had almost led to a stroke. Nastya expressed her gratitude to the neighbor who had called the ambulance just in time. The doctor didn't finish the sentence, but Nastya understood the implication. She asked the doctor to convey her hopes for her grandfather's recovery and inquired how long he would stay in the intensive care unit. The doctor informed her that he would remain in intensive care for a couple of days before being transferred to a general ward. The doctor also advised Nastya to protect her grandfather from any stressful experiences, as they believed nerves might have played a role in the attack. Nastya felt a slight relief upon hearing that the prognosis wasn't as dire as she had feared. She couldn't bear the thought of losing her grandfather, as he was the only person who truly loved her. Her mother had not survived childbirth, and her father had abandoned her. Her grandfather, along with her grandmother, had stepped in as her parents, raising her from diapers. She had a special bond with her grandfather, who doted on her as his granddaughter. Nastya trusted him with all her secrets. At the age of 13, Nastya had discovered that her mother was her grandfather's illegitimate child, which had astonished her. However, she had managed to accept this truth. Her grandmother had never spoken ill of herself, and her attitude towards all three grandchildren had always been the same. Unfortunately, Nastya had experienced mistreatment from other relatives, including her cousins, brother, and sister. Nastya hurriedly made her way to the pharmacy after leaving the hospital, carrying the list of essential medicines given by the doctor. As she returned home, she couldn't help but reflect on the experiences that may have triggered her grandfather's health crisis. It dawned on her that the tense atmosphere in her grandfather's apartment, particularly due to the disapproval of Uncle Kolya and his wife Larissa, might have played a part. Uncle Kolya and Larissa had never been fond of Nastya's presence in her grandfather's life. They feared that she would try to claim the apartment and leave her beloved grandfather with no place to go. This time, they were away in the village, showing no intention of providing any support to the poor old man. Learning of her grandfather's worsening condition, Nastya felt a mix of worry and determination. She knew she had to take action, but she was uncertain about what steps to take to save her grandfather. Returning to her small, frigid dorm room, Nastya shivered from the cold. The windows were adorned with huge cracks, allowing the chilly air to seep in. Undeterred, she wrapped herself in her grandmother's shawls and brewed a comforting cup of tea. In that moment, she made a resolute decision to move out of her grandfather's apartment and enroll in medical school after completing her current studies. She was driven by her deep desire to make her grandfather's life easier. Nastya's determination to provide for herself and support her grandfather led her to rely on scholarships and work as a nurse in the hospital. Her grandfather, aware of her refusal to accept financial help directly, would subtly slip money into her purse or jacket pocket. His gestures were a testament to his love and the unbreakable bond they shared. The children of the sun who is common to both grandmothers, and incidentally the grandmother recognized her descent from a native family. It was her uncle, or rather his wife Larissa, who couldn't stand the girl named Nastya. She went to the pharmacy to get essential medicines from a list given by the doctor and then returned home. She suspected that the reason for her recent experiences, which may have triggered the attack, was probably something in her grandfather's apartment. Uncle Kolya and his wife had repeatedly criticized Nastya because she lived with her grandfather, fearing that he would transfer the apartment to her in the future to the detriment of their beloved granddaughter. Apparently, this time the poor old man was in the village, and they definitely wouldn't leave him behind. Upon learning that his condition had worsened, Nastya wondered what to do and how to save her grandfather. She had no idea, so she entered her small dorm room and shivered from the cold. The windows had huge cracks, seemingly from which the wind was blowing in. Nastya threw her grandmother's shawls over her shoulders and started brewing hot tea. The girl began to prepare for the school day tomorrow. She had decided to move out of her grandfather's place and enrolled in medical school after finishing high school. With this decision, she hoped to make her grandfather's life easier, as she had witnessed her uncle's complaints about her living in that apartment. Her grandfather did not approve of her desire to move into the hostel, but Nastya was determined. She mainly lived off her scholarship and sometimes worked as a nurse in the hospital. However, her grandfather managed to discreetly give her money, knowing that his granddaughter would still refuse. He would secretly place money in her purse or jacket pocket. Nastya never forgot about her grandfather for a second and called him every day. Nastya made it a point to visit her grandfather as often as she could, always willing to help him with household chores. It seemed nobody else was in a hurry to assist him except for her. 2 days later, she was finally allowed to visit him, as he had been transferred from the intensive care unit. As Nastya held her grandfather's hand, tears streaming down her face, she whispered how worried she had been. She kissed his hand and reassured him that everything would be better soon. "Oh, my dear Nastyusha, I was so frightened for you. I don't even know what I would do without you," her grandfather responded, attempting to smile, though it was evident it took great effort. The doctor had informed him that he would recover soon and be able to return home. "Can we go home now, Grandpa?" he asked eagerly, a spark of joy gleaming in his eyes. "Before we leave, Grandpa, I'll stay with you for now." "You need me," Nastya replied, winking at him, knowing he was eager to leave the hospital soon. On the day of discharge, Nastya arrived at the hospital to help her grandpa return home. However, she ran into Uncle Kolya and Larissa. The woman couldn't resist making a caustic remark. "And what are you doing here? Are you waiting for grandfather to transfer the apartment to you? Pretending to be a caring granddaughter? Well, let me tell you, you won't get anything. He has other relatives, grandchildren who are not outcasts like you." Nastya's face twisted with a mixture of contempt and hurt as she felt the terrible attitude her family held towards her. She had always tried to avoid conflicts, but this time she couldn't hold back. "You are deeply mistaken, Larissa. I love my grandfather just the way he is. I don't care about the apartment or anything else. I genuinely care for him from the bottom of my heart, even if you can't understand that. In your heart, I see nothing but a thirst for profit. Just so you know, today I will go back to live with my grandfather, no matter what. You are against it. I understand that you want to mentally torment him so that he departs for the afterlife as soon as possible. But I won't let you do that. I hope you understand me." Without waiting for a response, Nastya entered the hospital room to help her grandfather get ready. "We came to pick you up, nephew. We wanted to take you home," Uncle Kolya said, seeing her grandfather leaving the room with Nastya's assistance. "No, son, I'll go with my granddaughter. Don't waste your time on me. You probably had to take time off work. Nastya will take care of me now. She has been coming to the hospital every day, talking to the doctors, and knows how to care for me. That's what I need now," the old man said. Nikolai turned away in embarrassment, realizing that they hadn't visited him once during his 3-week stay in the hospital. When they reached home, Nastya helped her grandfather settle into bed since he was still very weak. She then proceeded to clean and prepare dinner. She went to the store and bought his favorite groceries. The girl began cooking when suddenly her phone rang. The screen displayed Dasha, her cousin. There had never been a friendly relationship between the two girls, rather, quite the opposite. So Nastya was extremely surprised by the call. "What do you think you're doing? How dare you?" Dasha started without any greeting. Nastya understood immediately what she was referring to. You think you can swindle our sick grandfather? You're mistaken. You're just an opportunist that Grandpa once took pity on, nothing more. We are his family. Don't you dare try to persuade him to leave the apartment to you, the girl replied, speaking in a firm and assertive tone. Dasha seemed to have much more to say, but Nastya couldn't tolerate her audacity and interrupted, Listen, Dasha, if you're family, then why didn't you visit Grandpa in the hospital? Or maybe you lack the decency to they only think about inheritance and eagerly await his departure. But just so you know, I will never pretend or persuade for personal gain. I simply care about the person I love, Nastya stated firmly before hanging up the phone, anticipating the backlash she might face after those words. In the evening, while having dinner with her grandfather, they shared cherished memories of the past and laughed together. Well, Larissa replied, You did well in the hospital. I couldn't have done it myself. I'm truly grateful that fate brought you into our lives. Otherwise, I don't know how I would have spent my remaining years in this house. Grandfather, Nastya interrupted, May I ask you how my grandmother could accept me knowing that I am her illegitimate granddaughter? I always wanted to talk to her about this, but it's a topic we never touched upon. Grandfather's expression softened as he responded, Your grandmother was a kind and fair woman. She loved me deeply, and I loved her just as much. My actions were a mistake on my part, not hers. It was my fault, and it doesn't reflect on you or your mother. She made a wise decision, for which I am eternally grateful. She loved you just as much as she loved the other grandchildren. Quietly, a wave of warm memories washed over Nastya, bringing tears to her eyes. Life continued on, and she found solace in forging her own path. During the day, Nastya attended her classes, and in the evenings, she took care of her grandfather. She made sure to give them time alone, which pleased her relatives. However, one day, upon returning from school, Nastya inadvertently became a witness to an unpleasant conversation coming from her grandfather's room. She overheard a heated discussion between Uncle Kolya and her grandfather. Though she couldn't make out all the details, Nastya sensed that something was amiss. You have to leave this apartment. My son Stas will soon marry, and he needs to live here, Nikolay shouted. You're just parents, and you need to think rationally, Grandfather calmly responded. I once married your mother, and I bought this place for you. If it weren't for your bankruptcy and the collapse of your own company, we wouldn't be in this situation. Nikolay grew agitated, but Grandfather couldn't contain himself any longer. Where were you when trouble struck? Instead of helping, you remind me of your irresponsibility. You drank, roamed around, and had fun with other women. It was only when you urgently got married to Larissa to avoid military service that you realized your responsibilities. You're the last person who should be hiding behind someone's back. Get out. I don't want to see your face in my house, and don't you dare speak to Nastya like that again, Grandfather declared. Nastya hurried into her room, finding her grandfather pale and upset. She checked his blood pressure, administered his medication, and tried to comfort him. The next day, Grandfather had taken the day off, waiting for Nastya to wake up. Despite the events of the previous day, Nastya approached him with a hopeful smile. Get ready, Granddaughter. Today, we must visit a special place together, Grandfather said, his smile reflecting in his eyes. They took a taxi and traveled for about 2 hours to a village where most of the houses were old and dilapidated. One of these houses was their destination. Nastya followed her grandfather inside, where they sat on rickety stools. Grandfather's voice broke the silence. This is the house where I grew up, where Nikolay had his childhood. It was a happy time for me and Nina. Despite our wealthy relatives and their disapproval of our marriage, she chose to stay with me. At first, her parents refused to have any contact with her, but with time, they forgave us. Witnessing the depth of our love, each object in the room invoked fond memories in my heart. The apple orchard behind the house, which we had planted together, held a special place for both Grandfather and me. He sighed sadly, and tears glistened in his eyes as we sat there until twilight, exchanging stories I had never heard before. I was already filled with warmth for this humble abode that we called home. Late in the evening, we returned home, and grandfather promptly fell asleep. The following day, upon returning from my studies, I noticed an ambulance parked at the entrance. An unpleasant premonition pierced my heart, urging me to hurry up the stairs. As I entered the apartment, I found our neighbor Claudia Semyonovna in the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. "Cry, my dear. It will ease the pain," she said, understanding the gravity of the situation. I made my way to Nikolay and Larissa's room, where I spoke with the doctor. Seeing grandfather's lifeless body, I couldn't hold back my sobs. Larissa made no attempt to conceal her satisfaction. "I've been eagerly awaiting your departure," she hissed, casting me a contemptuous glance. Sobbing, I stood by my grandfather's grave, unable to leave for a long time. Even after everyone had dispersed, only Claudia Semyonovna and I remained, grappling to comprehend the events of the previous day. "I felt it too," I said, choking back my tears. "Do you know, on the day you left, Nikolay and Larissa came to visit him at home. I'm unsure of what they discussed, but soon after, Nikolay came running to me, saying that father wasn't feeling well and had called an ambulance." Claudia Semyonovna shared, her voice filled with concern. Whispered by Nastya, 6 months later, the whole family gathered at the notary's office for the division of inheritance rights. The apartment where the deceased had lived was transferred to his son, Nikolay, and his grandchildren, Daria and Stanislav. The notary began the proceedings, and Larissa, with almost a clap of her hands, expressed her satisfaction. To everyone's surprise, it was revealed that Anastasia, another granddaughter, had left a bequest a dilapidated old house in the village. Nastya smiled, finding solace in this unexpected outcome. It felt like a deserving wreck, considering how much time she had spent sarcastically enduring Dasha's laughter at her grandfather's expense. But Nastya missed those mocking remarks, and the following weekend, she embarked on a journey to the village with a promise to herself to restore the house. She was certain that her grandfather's spirit was beside her throughout the day. Nastya tirelessly cleaned the house, transforming it into a habitable place. As she rummaged through the sideboard, she came across something intriguing. On top lay an envelope bearing her grandfather's beautiful handwriting. With trembling hands, she recognized the familiar script as she opened the letter. "Dear Nastya, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I know you won't sell this house," the letter began. In the depths of the sideboard, there was a large box containing Grandma's family jewelry, accompanied by the money he had left. Grandpa expressed his heartfelt desire for her to use the funds for her education and housing in the city. Clutching the envelope, Nastya shed tears of mixed emotions. That evening, she purchased a spacious apartment in a new building and a beautiful car. After graduating, she fulfilled her promise and enrolled in the university. With the remaining money, she embarked on a new chapter in her life. Nastya invested in repairing the house in the village. Occasionally, she would visit Claudia Semyonovna, and they would always reminisce about her grandfather. During one of their conversations, Nastya learned that even Stas had a dispute over the apartment, each claiming to have more rights to it. Eventually, they decided to put the property up for sale. One day, as Nastya returned home from college and parked her car, she noticed a group of young people and girls near her entrance. As she walked by, she overheard someone calling her name. It was Dasha. "Hello, sister. How are you?" "The house hasn't collapsed yet," Dasha exclaimed, laughing out loud. Unperturbed, Nastya replied with a smile, "I didn't expect you to visit someone. I never thought your friends lived in such an upscale house. I thought they were just as scruffy as you." Dasha couldn't hide her astonishment, and Nastya delighted in having the upper hand over this pretentious person. She then continued on her way, leaving Dasha behind, her mouth agape in disbelief, and relishing the satisfaction of putting that snobbish individual in her place.